My son texted me, "Walk home from dinner. The Uber is expensive and it's only 8 blocks. You'll be fine." It was 10 p.m. in downtown Seattle. I'm 73 years old. But when a homeless man grabbed my arm and said, "Ma'am, don't go that way. Your son told 3 men where you'd be walking," everything changed. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I spent 40 years building a life I was proud of. My name is Margaret, and at 73 years old, I thought my son loved me. My husband, James, and I raised our only child, Stephen, in a comfortable home in Bellevue, Washington. James was a software engineer at Microsoft for 26 years, one of the originals, hired in 1989. I worked as a librarian at the University of Washington for 32 years. We weren't flashy people, but we were smart with money. We saved. We invested in Microsoft stock early. We paid off our mortgage by the time Stephen was in high school. When James died 4 years ago from a stroke, sudden, devastating, gone at 71, I inherited everything. Our home, now worth $1.8 million in the inflated Seattle market. James's Microsoft stock portfolio worth approximately $2.4 million. Our combined retirement accounts totaling $890,000. And a small vacation cabin on Whidbey Island worth $650,000. After 40 years of careful living, I was suddenly a wealthy widow. Stephen had always been attentive, or so I thought. He was 38, married to Amber, and they had 2 children, Dylan, who was 10, and Chloe, who was 7. Stephen worked in tech sales, and Amber was a lifestyle influencer on Instagram, which seemed to mean taking photos of overpriced brunches and calling it work. I helped them generously. When Stephen wanted to start his own tech consulting firm 5 years ago, I gave him $120,000 for startup costs. When they bought their house in Kirkland, I contributed $200,000 toward the down payment. When Amber wanted to renovate their master bathroom, I wrote a check for $65,000 because it's important to maintain property value. When Dylan needed private tutoring after falling behind in math, I paid $8,500 for a year of sessions. Every time, Stephen said, "Thanks, Mom, we'll pay you back." But we both knew he wouldn't, and I didn't mind. He was my son. You don't keep score with family. That's what I believed, until the night I almost died. The warning signs started about 6 months before that night, but I didn't see them for what they were. Stephen had started suggesting I downsize. "Mom, that house is too big for one person. Have you thought about a condo or assisted living? You're 73. What if something happens and no one finds you for days?" I was 73, not 93. I volunteered at the library 3 days a week. I took water aerobics classes. I had book club every Thursday and bridge every Tuesday. I was hardly isolated. But Stephen kept pushing. "You should really think about your safety, Mom. Seattle's getting dangerous. All these homeless people. You're vulnerable." Amber joined in. "We worry about you, Margaret. You're all alone in that big house with so much equity. Have you updated your will? Who's the beneficiary on your accounts? You need to have these conversations." I did have a will. Stephen was my sole heir. Everything would go to him. But the way they kept asking about it made something in my stomach twist. Then came the emergencies. Stephen needed $30,000 for a business opportunity that couldn't wait. Amber's car broke down, $8,000 for repairs. Dylan needed braces, $7,200. Chloe's school was fundraising. Could I contribute $5,000? I gave them everything they asked for. But I started noticing something. The emergencies always came right after I mentioned doing something with my money. Mentioned a donation to the library. Emergency. Mentioned a vacation to Italy. Emergency. Mentioned updating my will to include a trust for the grandchildren. Emergency. I told myself I was being paranoid. Stephen loved me. He was just worried about his mother. That's what good sons do. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Then came the dinner invitation that changed everything. It was a Friday in early November. Stephen called. "Mom, I want to take you to dinner, just you and me, that new Italian place downtown, Saturday at 7. I was touched. We rarely had one-on-one time anymore. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart." "Great. I'll pick you up at 6:30. But Saturday morning, Stephen texted, "Sorry, Mom, last-minute meeting with the client. Can you meet me at the restaurant instead? 7 p.m. at Il Sogno, corner of 5th and Union." I was disappointed but understanding. Stephen was busy. I Ubered downtown, arriving exactly at 7. The dinner was strange from the start. Stephen seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly. When I asked about Amber and the kids, he gave short answers. When I mentioned I was thinking of setting up educational trusts for Dylan and Chloe, his jaw tightened. "Why would you do that? Just leave everything to me. I'll handle it." "I want to make sure it's protected specifically for their education." "I said I'll handle it." His voice was sharp. Then he softened. "Sorry, Mom. Long week. I trust you." We finished dinner around 9:30. The restaurant was in Pioneer Square, a neighborhood that had gotten rougher over the years. More homeless encampments, more property crime. I'd never been downtown this late by myself. "Should we split an Uber?" I asked as we walked outside. Stephen checked his phone. "Actually, Mom, I'm heading the opposite direction, and Uber's surging right now. $45 to get to Bellevue. That's ridiculous." "It's fine, Stephen. I don't mind paying." "Mom, you're always throwing money around. It's only 8 blocks to the transit center. You can catch the bus from there. It's perfectly safe." I looked down the dark street. Pioneer Square at 10 p.m. was not perfectly safe. "Stephen, I don't think—" "Mom, you need to stop being so paranoid. Nothing's going to happen. Seattle's fine. Walk to the transit center, catch the bus, go home. Easy." He hugged me quickly, got into his car, and drove away. I stood on the street corner, my purse clutched tightly, looking down 5th Avenue toward the transit center. 8 blocks. Maybe Stephen was right. Maybe I was being paranoid. I started walking. The first 2 blocks were okay. There were still some people around, other diners leaving restaurants, a few couples walking to their cars. But by block 3, the streets had emptied. The street lights seemed dimmer. Shadows pooled in doorways. I walked faster, my heart pounding. My phone was in my purse. I could call an Uber. I should call an Uber. But Stephen's voice echoed in my head. "You're always throwing money around. Stop being so paranoid." I kept walking. By block 5, I knew I'd made a mistake. The street had gone completely dark. Most of the buildings were closed for the night. I could see the transit center ahead, only 3 more blocks. But those blocks looked like a canyon of shadows. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, fast, multiple sets. I walked faster. The footsteps matched my pace. I was 2 blocks from the transit center when a hand grabbed my arm. I screamed, tried to pull away, prepared to fight for my life. Ma'am, stop. I'm not going to hurt you. I looked up. It was a man in his 50s, wearing a worn jacket and carrying a backpack. His face was weathered, his beard uneven. Homeless, I realized. And he'd just grabbed me. I tried to pull away again, but his grip was firm. Ma'am, please listen. Don't go that way. He pointed toward the transit center. There are 3 men waiting at the underpass. They know you're coming. Your son told them. My blood went cold. What? Your son. Tall guy, dark hair, drove away in a silver Lexus. He came by about 20 minutes ago, talked to 3 guys who hang out under the bridge, showed them a photo, said his mother would be walking through alone in a few minutes, coming from Il Sogno, said she's loaded, said she always carries cash. I couldn't breathe. You're lying. I wish I was, ma'am. My name's Robert. I've been on these streets for 4 years. I know those guys. They're dangerous. They do what they're paid to do, and your son paid them. Paid them to do what? Robert's eyes were sad. I don't know. Rob you, hurt you, maybe worse, but he set you up. I heard the whole conversation. I'm sorry. My legs felt weak. My son, my Stephen, had sent me into danger deliberately. Come on, Robert said gently. There's a 24-hour diner 2 blocks that way. We'll get you inside. You can call someone safe to pick you up. I let him guide me away from the transit center, away from whatever had been waiting for me in that underpass, away from the trap my son had set. Robert walked me to the diner, a grimy all-night place with fluorescent lights and chipped formica tables. He sat me down in a booth near the window, flagged down a waitress, and ordered me coffee. I'm fine, he said when I tried to pay. Just drink your coffee and call someone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Who could I call? Stephen? The son who just tried to... What? Have me robbed? Killed? I called my friend Patricia, who lived in Queen Anne. She answered on the 2nd ring. Margaret, it's 10:30. Is everything okay? Patricia, I need help. I'm at a diner in Pioneer Square. Can you come get me? Of course. Stay there. I'm coming right now. While I waited, Robert sat across from me, nursing a cup of coffee the waitress had brought him without being asked. She knew him, I realized. He was a regular. Why did you help me? I asked. Robert shrugged. Because it was the right thing to do, and because nobody deserves what those guys would have done to you, especially not from her own son. How did you know he was my son? I heard him talking to those guys. My mother, rich old lady, walking alone. Won't report it because she'll be too embarrassed. Do whatever you need to do. Those were his words, ma'am. I'm sorry. I sat there, the coffee growing cold, trying to process what Robert was telling me. My son, the baby I'd raised, the boy I'd loved, the man I'd supported financially for years, had just tried to have me attacked. Why? The answer came to me slowly, horribly. The will, the house, the stock portfolio, the money. If I died, Stephen inherited everything, millions of dollars. But if I was just robbed, hurt, traumatized, I'd be vulnerable, scared, easier to manipulate into moving to assisted living, signing over power of attorney, making things easier by transferring assets. Either way, Stephen won. Patricia arrived 30 minutes later. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "Oh, Margaret, what happened?" I looked at Robert. This man saved my life. Patricia drove me home. On the way, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Margaret," she said finally, "you need to call the police. He's my son. He tried to have you hurt, maybe killed. He's not acting like your son." She was right, but I couldn't bring myself to make that call. Not yet. Instead, I did something else. I called my attorney. I met with Elizabeth Chen on Monday morning. Elizabeth had handled James's estate, helped me with financial planning, guided me through complex decisions. "Elizabeth," I said, "I need to tell you what happened Saturday night." I told her everything, the dinner, Stephen's insistence I walk alone, Robert's warning, the conversation he'd overheard, the 3 men waiting in the underpass. Elizabeth's face grew darker with every sentence. "Margaret, this is attempted elder abuse, possibly conspiracy to commit assault, possibly conspiracy to commit murder. You need to file a police report." "I need to be sure first. What if Robert was wrong? What if he misunderstood?" "Then we gather evidence. But Margaret, if Stephen tried this once, he'll try again. You need protection, legal protection, and physical protection." Over the next week, Elizabeth and I put a plan in place. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb. His job, find out what Stephen was really doing, follow him, monitor his communications if possible, find evidence. I also changed my will immediately. Elizabeth drew up new documents. Everything now went into a trust managed by Elizabeth and Patricia. Stephen would receive $50,000, enough to be meaningful, but a fraction of what he expected. The bulk of my estate would go to educational trusts for Dylan and Chloe, charitable donations, and a significant amount to programs for the homeless. Robert had saved my life. The least I could do was help people like him. I signed the new documents on November 15th. Elizabeth filed them immediately. Then we waited. Stephen called on November 20th. "Hey, Mom, sorry I've been MIA. Work's been crazy. How are you?" His voice was warm, concerned, like nothing had happened. "I'm fine, Stephen." Good, good. Hey, I wanted to apologize for the other night. I shouldn't have made you walk. That was inconsiderate. Are you okay? You got home safe?" I felt something cold settle in my chest. He was checking, making sure his plan had worked, or making sure I hadn't suspected anything if it hadn't. "I took an Uber," I lied, "from the restaurant. It was too late to walk." A pause. "Really? I thought I saw you walking." "You saw me walk to the corner. Then I called an Uber." Another pause. Longer this time. "Oh, good. That's good. I'm glad you were safe." We talked for a few more minutes. Surface conversation about the kids, about Thanksgiving plans. But I could hear it in his voice. Disappointment. His plan hadn't worked, which meant he'd try again. Marcus Webb's report arrived on December 3rd. What he'd found made me physically ill. Stephen had been living beyond his means for years. His consulting business was failing. He'd lost his 3 biggest clients in the past year. He and Amber had over $340,000 in credit card debt. Their mortgage was 3 months behind. They'd taken out a home equity line of credit and maxed it out. They were facing foreclosure. But that wasn't the worst part. Marcus had managed to access Stephen's text messages through a legal loophole involving his business phone. The messages to Amber from the night of our dinner. "It's done. She's walking right into it." Did it work? Don't know yet. If it does, we're set. If not, we'll try the medication angle or the fall down the stairs. One way or another, we're getting that money. She's not going to live forever anyway. The medication angle, the fall down the stairs, one way or another. My son was planning my murder. I sat in Elizabeth's office reading the report and felt everything inside me go very still. This wasn't about boundaries or tough love or complicated family dynamics. This was about survival. "We go to the police," Elizabeth said. "Now. Today. This is enough for attempted conspiracy. Maybe more." I nodded. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My heart wasn't pounding. I was perfectly calm because I finally understood. The son I'd loved was gone. Maybe he'd never existed. In his place was a man who saw me as an obstacle between him and money. And obstacles, apparently, could be removed. The Seattle Police Department took the case seriously once they saw Marcus's evidence. Detective Sarah Martinez from the Major Crimes Unit took my statement. "Mrs. Morrison, based on what you're telling me and the evidence provided, we have probable cause to investigate. We'll need to corroborate the witness statement from Robert. Do you have contact information for him?" "No, but he's usually near the Pioneer Square Transit Center." "We'll find him. We'll also need to bring in the 3 men he mentioned. If we can get one of them to talk, confirm that your son approached them, we have a solid case." Over the next 3 weeks, the investigation unfolded. Robert was found and gave a detailed statement. The 3 men were brought in for questioning. One of them, facing unrelated charges, cut a deal and confirmed everything. Stephen had paid them $5,000 to scare me, rough me up enough that I'd be traumatized and dependent. He said if things went wrong and I ended up dead, that was fine too, the man told police. Said it would look like a mugging gone bad. Said he'd be the grieving son. Stephen was arrested on December 28th, charged with conspiracy to commit assault, elder abuse, and attempted murder. The news made local headlines. Tech consultant accused of plotting mother's murder for inheritance. Amber was arrested as an accessory. The text messages proved her involvement. Their children, my grandchildren, went to stay with Amber's parents. And I stood in my house looking out at the December rain, feeling nothing but a terrible, hollow relief. The trial began in May. 7 months of my life spent preparing, reliving, explaining to lawyers and judges and juries what my own son had tried to do to me. Stephen's defense attorney tried to paint me as a paranoid old woman who'd misunderstood an innocent situation. Tried to suggest Robert had made everything up. Tried to claim the text messages were taken out of context. But the evidence was overwhelming. Robert's testimony, the 3 men who confirmed Stephen's approach, the text messages, Marcus Webb's financial investigation showing motive, my attorney Elizabeth walking the jury through each step of Stephen's plan. I took the stand on the 4th day. I testified for 3 hours, told the story from beginning to end, answered every question clearly, calmly, without breaking down. The prosecutor asked, "Mrs. Morrison, do you believe your son intended to kill you?" I looked at Stephen. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Yes," I said. "I believe he would have preferred that I die that night. It would have been simpler. But if I was just hurt, traumatized, he could have used that too. Either way, he won. That's all he cared about." "How does that make you feel?" I paused, thought about the question. Sad and angry, but mostly just done. I spent 40 years loving a son who only ever saw me as money. I'm done with that. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Stephen was sentenced to 12 years in state prison. Amber received 5 years. They both would be eligible for parole after serving 2/3 of their sentences. Their house was foreclosed on, their possessions sold to pay debts, their lives destroyed by their own greed. Dylan and Chloe, now 11 and 8, were living with Amber's parents. I'd reached out, tried to maintain a relationship, but Amber's family wanted nothing to do with me. They blamed me for prosecuting their daughter. I'd set up trusts for both children anyway. When they turned 18, they'd have access to letters I'd written explaining everything. They'd have the trial transcripts. They'd have the truth. And they'd have $200,000 each for college. I hoped someday they'd understand. I hoped someday they'd forgive me for sending their father to prison. But I couldn't sacrifice myself to protect them from the truth. That was 8 months ago. My life has changed in ways I never imagined. I sold the Bellevue house. Too many memories, too many ghosts. I bought a smaller condo in downtown Seattle, ironically not far from Pioneer Square. I wanted to be near the place where Robert saved my life, near the place where everything became clear. I found Robert again. With Marcus Webb's help, we located him and I made him an offer. I would pay for him to get into transitional housing, help him get back on his feet. He'd saved my life. The least I could do was help save his. Robert's now living in supportive housing, working part-time at a community center. We have coffee once a month. He's become one of my closest friends, the man who saw me as a human being worth saving when my own son saw me as an obstacle. I've also started volunteering with homeless outreach programs. I donate significant amounts to shelters, transitional housing, mental health services. Robert's situation opened my eyes to a world I'd been sheltered from. These people aren't statistics. They're individuals who fell through the cracks, who made mistakes, who got unlucky. They're people, and sometimes they're the ones with the most humanity. I think about that night constantly, how close I came. If Robert hadn't been there, hadn't been paying attention, hadn't cared enough to intervene, I'd be dead or broken, and Stephen would have inherited everything and moved on with his life. Looking back now, I understand what happened. I'd loved Stephen so completely that I'd forgotten to teach him that people, including his mother, have value beyond what they can provide. I'd given him everything, paid for everything, fixed every problem, and in doing so, I'd taught him that I was an ATM, not a person. When the money ran out and I was still alive, still in the way, he did what made sense to him. Remove the obstacle. The greatest lesson I've learned, love without boundaries becomes exploitation. Generosity without reciprocity becomes entitlement. And sometimes the people we trust most are the ones most willing to hurt us. My legacy isn't the money I saved or the stock portfolio I built. It's in the boundaries I finally learned to set. It's in the example I've left for Dylan and Chloe, that you don't sacrifice yourself for people who see you as disposable, that self-preservation isn't selfish, that sometimes love means saying no. What would you do if your own child set a trap to hurt you? If you discovered the person you'd sacrificed everything for wanted you dead, would you have the courage to choose yourself, even when it meant sending them to prison? Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives someone else the strength to trust their instincts, to accept help even from unexpected places, to understand that your life has value beyond what you can give others. You deserve to be safe, always.